Welcome everybody, welcome back to another Carcast episode, and this is a Carcast pit stop with my beautiful and lovely friend Yazeed.
Thank you.
We've been speaking so much about one topic when me and him actually sit down and come together, and it's the idea of like this whole male construct, porn, sex, and our legitimate struggles with it growing up, how it affected us, how it affected our relationships, how it actually put frames and ideas and actually made us act in ways that, though we internally felt, well, I can say for me, I internally felt uncomfortable and not proper with it, I still went out and did it because I felt like that is what a male should do. And especially at a young age, not knowing that we have a choice, that we can do things, that the way that society is presented to us is not the way that we have to live. Going through a kid, it was really a big struggle. And this is one of these topics I believe nowadays more and more males are speaking about, because a lot of us are dropping off that mask of masculinity. Yeah. And to realize that we don't have to be a male, we don't have to be masculine, we don't have to be strong. We just can be ourselves, and that is a strength. If somebody calls you, they're like, grow some balls, like that for some reason it's such a common male term to like man up, but what does that actually mean? And as a kid, if you feel like you weren't, you felt that there was something wrong with you. And if you weren't acting in a certain way, you thought that there was something wrong with you, because as a kid, we had no idea that we had a choice between fitting in and belonging. A lot of us fit in so hard in our lives, we became so tired with it, versus belonging. And that's also with relationship and male stereotypes and living out these ideas that kind of society put into us. And as a male, I have to admit, a lot of times that brought me into a struggle, that brought me into depression, that brought me into a very dark, deep place, because I'm like, how can I be feeling this way when I'm a man or I'm a male and I was born this way? And the thing is, in school, teachers at that time, and I'm not sure about now, they didn't address it. They didn't speak about it. This kind of conversation that you wouldn't have. And that made a lot of us grow up thinking that internally that there's something wrong with us. If all the men are speaking this way and the movies are showing this way, then why can't I feel comfortable by being this way that everything else is shown? It is a struggle, and it was a battle, and we had these conversations back to, because both him and I, we realized a lot of stuff. We realized a lot of things on our journey, and I can go on and talk about things, but I'd really like for Yazeed to share some of the things that he went through. And especially, he's a beautiful man.
Thank you.
Great husband. He has kids.
Oh, I love my kids.
Right? There's so many, and to be that in today's society, growing up in that and being in that long-term relationship, there's so many ideas and projections and constructs of how this should be and how a male should act, and this is how you should think. So once again, share a little bit of that with us.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. That was a beautiful introduction. And I think for me, it started when I was very young, and the way that I was introduced to what a relationship between a man and a woman should look like.
So where were you born?
So I was born in Abu Dhabi, and that's where I was raised.
Okay.
Grew up most of my life. Yeah, before I moved to Canada. But I, got introduced to pornography quite early on in my life. I think I was 6 years old when I first started watching it.
Wow.
And that was my first introduction into what a relationship between a man and a woman should be like. So I watched those videos, and you can imagine having like a 6-year-old watching videos of men and women engaging themselves in ways that I've never heard of or even experienced before. And what that did was it almost gave me a bit of introductory foundation onto what a relationship between a man and woman should be like. So whatever I saw in those movies is what I thought what men and women should do when they get together. And at the time, this was like in the early 80s. The internet wasn't there yet, and there wasn't this openness about discussing these types of things, and so we couldn't really talk about it. We couldn't, I couldn't go to school the next day and tell my teacher, hey, I watched this video of. It's almost like energetically you could feel there was something you shouldn't be talking openly about. And so, watching that content and just engaging with it, not understanding it, but at the time I didn't understand it, and now I realize that it was basically programming me to view the relationship between a man and a woman as being that of what happens in these types of movies. And it's affected my ability to have authentic, real connections with women, because of the programming I received. It influenced me into viewing women as sexual objects, which is what pornography does. It just basically pushes forth the message and the programming that women are sexual objects, and that when a man and a woman get together, what always follows is some kind of interaction, involving them engaging each other. And I try not to get into the terminology so much of what happens in those types of movies, because in all honesty, what I'd like to do is try and focus on the other side of that. I want to try and not use the same terminology that got me hooked to this content and material, but suffice to say that it influences, and it greatly influenced my ability to have thoughtful, authentic relationships with women, because in the back of my head, I had this unconscious programming saying that women were sexual objects, and that any interaction with a woman should lead to some kind of sexual activity, which is the farthest from the truth.
Well, let's take a second and look at it. So it's such a great point. We've had this discussion before when you talked about it. Tell me, when you watch porn, what are these scenarios that program us to be this way?
Well, I mean, when you watch, pornographic movies, and they're very, they're designed to basically replicate real life situations, right? So anytime you're watching a movie, there's always a narrative. A guy going to see the doctor, or a guy going for, to school, to learn something in a class, or friends going out to a picnic together, or even a family just sitting around the table at home. And so they've really taken every single possible scenario that you can have in real life. But what happens in the movies is that shows you it always ends up in some kind of sexual activity between the man and the woman. And beyond that, they even eliminate all kinds of boundaries, because in these movies you basically see men and women engaging together regardless of what their relationship is. Whether it's a student with their teacher, or a patient with their doctor, or a little boy with his nanny, or a father with a stepdaughter. And it just, at the time, like when a male is watching these videos, obviously they know how to program you to get excited. You get excited about what's going on, and you feel this energy rising in your body. It's your sexual energy. and that's how they engage you. But they program you to believe that the only use for the sexual energy that runs through your body is to engage in sexual activity with a woman. And it's sad that we grow up believing that that is the only use for our sexual energy, and we basically walk around trying to satisfy this urge in any way that we can. So I think this is the big thing about these movies, is that they program your brain to function in a way where no matter what situation you're in, to always turn it around into some kind of sexual fantasy, with between the man and the woman, whatever situation they're in. And it's when you're in it, you just identify as being a lustful man. And this is the other side of it, is that society actually enforces and encourages this type of behavior. Like you were saying when you started with, what does it mean to be a man? Well, when we were growing up, a man, like at school, was the guy who was, had the most girls around him, who was going out with the most amount of girls, who was, going out on dates, and that was the measure of masculinity. And you come to believe that this is our purpose, and this is the only way for us to gain any kind of value or find our place in the world that we live in. And all of it happens on the craziest part is that it all happens on an unconscious level. You're watching these videos, you're getting excited by them, but in the background you are being programmed to think, to act, to feel, and do things in a certain way. And it ends up affecting our ability to have real relationships with women.
Well, let's look at a scenario. So in every porn scene, there's a guy that comes in.
Yeah.
Let's say does something,
Yep.
and no matter what, the woman will always say yes.
Yes.
And the woman has no personality.
Nope.
And pretty much the man can do whatever they want to the female, and everything is great. The man finishes at the end, and you're like, and these are the things that they're putting into our brain that's just like, so this is a reality, so this is how women are.
This is
Growing up, you're like, so this is how sex is done, this is the reality. And then you grow up with being a man, and you're like, well, that's how it should be. And it's just like you've programmed yourself so deeply that, like, women don't have personalities, they'll always say yes, that there are pleasure toys.
Sexual objects.
But what does that do when we engage in it and we realize and it's not?
Yeah.
And it makes us feel like it's like the state of confusion. It's just like, well, that's what they showed me, but it's not like that. And I'm confused because I don't know what to do. And in our age, when we were younger, it's no teacher. Like, there's nobody we could really speak to. Or in our mind, there's nobody that we thought we could speak to have these kind of conversations. And if you're trying to talk to your guy friends, listen, when you're young, you're growing up. You guys don't know, and you're trying to learn. But we're so quick. The age of 13, I was a man already.
Yeah.
You put me outside, I could buy a house, get a car. I was the man. It's like when you're a boy, you want to be a man so fast, and then when you become a man at an older age, like us, I just want to be a kid and I just want to play. So what I want to know is, when you watched a lot of these things, did you feel shame? Did you feel blame? Did you find moments where there was touching yourself? How did it deal with your relationship? Like, I know there's a lot of questions, but please feel free to choose one.
Yeah, so when I first started watching the material, I didn't really know what to make of it, but I did know that it moved some kind of energy inside my body. And that's what got to me, and it really is a beautiful energy. But unfortunately, I felt like, and this is what I refer to as the sexual energy. It wakes up your sexual energy, and it's a beautiful feeling, and it's a euphoric feeling. Unfortunately, to me, I believe so watching that content and engaging with it at a young age programmed me into believing that was the only use of my sexual energy. That the only way I could use my sexual energy was to engage in pornographic content, and then maybe when I was old enough that I could actually replicate that into my relationships with other women. And at points, you know, I would question it, but then the urge would be so strong. And you know what? It's you know, because we talked about this before, and I read something about how watching pornography actually damages a part of your brain, right? We read that the impulse.
Prefrontal cortex,
Yeah.
the front of your brain.
And I was reading that that basically allows you to control impulses, and it's so true, because I find that, you know, when you've engaged with that content for such a long time, the minute you see it, the impulse and the urge to go and act it out, and you feel the sexual energy running through your body, and all you want to do is, because you've been programmed by these movies, that what you do, the way you deal with the sexual energy is you go and you either pleasure yourself, or you engage in physical activity with another woman in order to let that sexual energy come out of you. And that's what the instruction guide says, right? You meet the woman, like you said, and it doesn't matter what situation it is, what social setting it is in these movies. The woman, you're right, she always says yes. She's always a sexual object that's ready and available to pleasure the man. And we walk out into the world thinking that this is how it really works. You know, we go into our daily lives, whether it's at work or whether it's at school or whether it's with friends or gatherings, and you have this you know, this kind of programming running in the back always, and it this is what really affects our ability to have these authentic relationships, and it affected me especially, and you know, with the most important relationship in my life, which is with my wife. And you know, I've been married for 15 years, and we have 2 amazing kids, and I've struggled with all this programming that I went through growing up, and I realized at one point that I needed to do something about it, because you know, as I started getting more and more into the spiritual aspect of life, and at one point became dedicated to just becoming the best version of myself, one of the first things that I learned was that the first thing you needed to do was to be present. And what this, you know, the programming that I see from the pornography prevented me from being able to be present in the most intimate moments, you know, with my wife, where you know, instead of being present in the moment and giving, you know, all of my senses to the encounter, I would sit there and have to, you know, recall scenes that I've seen from these movies in order for me to be able to arouse my sexual energy, to be able to engage in it. And that really got to me when I started thinking about that. I was like, so wow, so I'm here with a woman that I love, with a woman that I connect with on all levels so deeply, and yet I feel like I need to I need to close my eyes and go elsewhere in order to allow my sexual energy to get activated and for myself to be aroused. That really got to me. I was like, it's all about being in the present moment, and yet I'm doing everything but being present. So why can't I do this while being present? Why can't I have a meaningful, sacred encounter with my wife without having to run off mentally somewhere else in order to be able to activate my sexual energy? And that's when I, you know, started thinking about it, and I was like, wow, like this is really an addiction. You know, not a lot of people talk about it, not a lot of people mention it, but I, you know, looking at it in my life, it's an addiction. And I asked myself, I was like, do I want to continue living the secret life, which is what this kind of content encourages you to do. It encourages you to live a secret life, which I was. So do I want to continue living a secret life? Is this how, you know, is this what being the best version of myself means? And I realized that no, like, in order for me to properly deal with this, I need to be as authentic as possible. And so I sat down with my wife, and I was vulnerable with her, and I opened up to her, and I told her, listen, this is what I go through, and this is what I feel, and it is affecting my ability to have a meaningful relationship with you. And while I was ashamed to talk about it before, now I realize that the only way to deal with this is for us to have an open discussion with it. And it's hard to have that kind of discussion with any woman. Because women have a lot, rightfully have a lot of wounds around, being good enough and being loved and being cherished for who they are. And for me to sit there and tell, being open with my wife about the fact that I, grew up, spent a lot of my time engaging in pornographic content, that it's affected my ability to be present with her. These are hard things to talk about, but you know what? I took a chance and I said, look, this is a relationship that I believe in, and I believe that if this is a strong partnership, then we'll be able to work with each other through anything. And I've been very blessed to have a partner that is open to working on this with me. And in the beginning, it really triggered a lot of wounds in both her and me. But now, a few years into openly being able to talk about this, I've been able to heal. And predominantly because my wife was able to show me unconditional love and acceptance. She accepted me for the way that I was, and allowed me and gave me the space to share of my issues surrounding this addiction, and together we've been able to heal wonderfully from it. And so in a way, I'm glad that things happened the way they happened, because it's allowed me now to come into a deeper place of understanding, and me giving my wife the male perspective on things, and her giving me the female perspective, has allowed us to have compassion for each other.
So I'm curious to know this, because one of the things that we're really not taught is so I'm going to ask you this, because as a married man, did you ever get lust and love confused?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing question, and pornography, confuses you into believing that lust is love. I remember, when I went to university and I first, started dating and going out with girls, I definitely confused lust for love. So if I ever felt the same energy activating within me that I did when I was watching a pornographic movie, I would think that was love. So if I saw someone that I found attractive, and it got my sexual energy running, and then that would make me believe that was love. And I confused lust for love, and that continued to be a problem for me throughout my life. And it affected my ability to have those meaningful and authentic relationships, because for me, the objective was to replicate what was happening in the pornographic movies. So for me, any relationship that I got into had to mature into the things that happen in pornographic movies.
Well, what about in your marriage? Did you ever get the idea of, for other women? Because as a male, I personally don't think it's wrong to see other women that are, and I don't mean to date other women. What I mean is, well, to each their own, depending on your relationship. But what I mean is, there are a lot of beautiful people in this world.
Yes,
and I think
absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with it. But when you're in a marriage, and did you ever kind of confuse lust for love?
Yeah, because again, so when you're watching pornographic movies, in that world, you basically have the ability to engage with any woman that you find attractive. And in the narratives in those types of movies, there are certainly content that I've watched where married couples are having things on the side, or getting together and doing things with. Yeah, look, the scenarios are endless, and I think that's what they push out there. The programming is that you are able to engage sexually with anyone that you find attractive, and it doesn't matter what the social construct is. The other thing they encourage is having multiple partners. That this is something that you're encouraged to do with as many people as possible and as many people as you find attractive, and that makes it very difficult to have a committed relationship, because you're focusing your time on the relationship, but at the same time you've got this programming in the back of your head that's saying, oh, but look for, is there an attractive person walking by that you that you need to be looking at right now, and the minute you see somebody walking by and they're attractive, again the programming kicks in. Oh, this is not a person, this is a sexual object. And then it's almost like something takes over, for me anyway, it was like something takes over your body and then you're just consumed with it. And it's difficult because you're trying to figure out right from wrong. You want to make sure that you're honoring everyone involved, but at the same time there's this real physical need to move this energy that's now been aroused inside of you. And the way I used to do it when I was growing up is I would retreat into a private space where it was just me, hidden from everybody, and I would release that energy, and I would feel very ashamed. Yeah, you asked about the shame. Yeah, I did, and that's another thing that got to me. Like, if this is something that's normal and this is something that's healthy, why is it that we're always ashamed, or why is it that we're always embarrassed when we do it? Why is it that when we feel this energy move through us, why do we always have to go and keep it secret? Why don't we do it publicly? Why don't we do it openly?
Well, the thing is, nowadays people joke about it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I just did that. Like, oh yeah, like you probably I just did that like 3 times today. It's just like, and we joke about it, but I believe that joke, taking away from something so sacred, something so beautiful, something so meaningful. It's, and especially when you're growing up as a kid, it's your brain's developing, and in a developmental stage you're wiring your brain to be pleasure. This is how we do it. And everybody's telling you that this is the normal, this is the way to go. So you're pleasuring yourself. And then interactions with women and other people, pleasuring yourself. I know that, for me growing up, first time I saw a pornographic magazine, I was disgusted. I literally felt disgusted. I'm like, ooh. Like, to see the female body that way, for some reason as a kid I did not enjoy, and yet more of my friends would show me more and more, and then I rationalized that, okay, this is the norm, then women, like, I should see them like this, and then they, like, the porn would come on and like, oh, this is the way that porn should be, like they would recommend things. And it's not that I was disgusted by the woman's body, it's just that I didn't, as a kid, I realized that I actually found it a lot more sacred than it was. And the way that it was being projected in that way was, it just didn't feel right to me. And I couldn't put words to it, because at the time I had no idea, because if this is what's right with everybody, why does it feel so wrong to me?
Yeah.
And then you get to this age where you literally, your body's changing and you're getting erections and you are horny as sin. Like, like you'd be standing there in the middle of nowhere and all of a sudden you get an erection. And you're just like, okay. Teacher would be like,
yeah, that's cool. Oh my God.
Give a presentation. You're like, no, I'm okay. I'm going to wait. They're like, get up. I'm like, it's not going to happen. Send me to the principal's office. Doesn't matter. Just give me 4 minutes. Something's going on. And, it's like, you don't, like, how do you tell it? Like, teacher, puberty is happening at this exact moment. I need you to understand that. And I just rather not get up because I have a tent.
Yeah.
But then comes the idea, when you're with your friends, of be a man, more is better. You know, it's like, I don't know. I personally got caught in the idea that no relationship was good enough.
Yeah.
That there's more.
Yeah. Yes.
There's always more.
Yes.
It's like, why be with her? There's something else better. There's something else better. You're watching all this porn, and like in the head, it's like get more, get more, get more, get more, get more, and then it's never enough, and you're never satisfied.
Yeah.
I literally, at a very young age, I crossed the idea of connection and penetration.
Yeah.
Where all I wanted to do was connect. I really just wanted to connect. But I felt that the only way to connect, because of the group I was with, was to penetrate, was to kiss, was like, this is the only way that I could really be a man, you know? And when I was with a girl, I think of another girl, because I'm like, well, this is what I should be doing. And like, literally creating these, like, living up these constructs in my mind, where I became so good at being with so many women that I felt so lonely. I was surrounded by so many, but I was lonely, and it was killing me inside. It's like, the one thing I wanted to do was to connect. And I thought I was doing it right, but I wasn't. And then when I was actually with a girl that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay with this one a little longer. I would have sex, and then I would have to go watch porn after. I was never really present because I was constantly having to watch it.
Yeah.
And like, it's not fair, because she couldn't fulfill my fantasies, because the one thing about this addiction is the first porn is a little hit. Well, then once that hit can't give you what you need, then you're going to add up and then change it. And then, you know, you start to find a little more of like, well, what's really out there?
Yeah.
And then you start to diverse, and you go through this, and you're just like you start to see, you take away the sacred
sanctity of it,
of what sex actually is.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point, it's like you're going through the motions without any feeling. You're not present. And I know that actually put me in a whirlwind for a long time. It really made me go through depression, because I'm like, I'm with somebody that I like, but yet I can't fully enjoy it. I can't fully engage in it. It's like I gotta keep on finding one more, because like I'm not getting it from them. It's like the girls were my drug dealers, and like I was like, I need to find the right supply, and I couldn't. And in the male world, and with all my friends, they're like, oh man, you're doing so great, you're with so many girls, you know. I'm just like, yeah, but no, I didn't feel that way. I really didn't. But I put on this persona and this mask of like, oh yeah, man, I know.
It's, you know what, I think it has a lot to do with you know, as individual as we are, and as independent as we are, at the end of the day, you're a product of the society that you live in. And so I find the society and the culture that we live in, especially growing up, encouraged and condoned these types of behaviors. So for men to have multiple partners was accepted. For men to engage in pornographic content was acceptable. You know, for men to have affairs was acceptable. You know, I can't remember ever sitting down with a group of guy friends talking about, you know, my escapades with women, and ever, you know, ever being told, no, that's not what you should do. You should be, in a committed relationship. It'd always be like, yeah, that's how men are. It's fine. And for the longest time, I identified myself as a lustful man. So I'm just a man that, you know, is addicted to lust, and it's something that's okay. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to work on it. I don't need to heal it, because people accept me the way I am, and the society that I live in says that it's okay to be this way.
And the one thing I want to ask you, because in my group of friends when I was growing up, it wasn't like, oh man, let me tell you about the personality of this girl. Let me tell you how sweet she is, and how kind she is, and the amazingness. And maybe there was those conversations, and the friends would be like, oh, that's great, but like, tell me a little more about her, you know, like, how is this, how is that? It's like, one
man.
outweighed the other.
Yeah.
And then my idea of what was important was, okay, now if I'm going to find a girl, yeah, these things are important, but I need to find something external. And that's hard on women itself, because the makeup industry and all these industries, like, women have it hard, man. Like, there's a lot onto it. And don't get me wrong, men also have it hard as well, in the sense that, like, we believe that this is exactly what we need to do, but yet we're in conflict with ourselves. And people ask, why is the suicide rate in men growing up? Because we're not giving ourselves permission to be not a male, but ourselves. And then from that, learn. But it's like, I'm not giving myself permission. I'm not speaking my truth. I'm afraid if I'm going to say things, what will people think? What will people say? And like, you go through these crazy ideas, like you go through this insanity, but it's like, the reason that we're here and we're talking about this is because it's okay. Because I feel it, he feels it, and so many of us are out there. There's men that are in marriages, and they see other women and they're just like, oh my God, that's the girl for me. Because one thing I wish they did talk about in school, and one thing I'll talk about now, is when you get into a relationship, that beginning time is amazing. That feeling that you're crazy about them, you feel it in your body, but that eventually goes away. And then the real relationship starts. But if you continue to chase that high, well, what's going to happen? You're going to divorce. And they say that if you divorce that one time, you're going to do it again and again and again. And I'm not speaking from books, I'm speaking from friends and experiences that I've seen in my life. And the other thing is, it's like, nobody really talks about that other aspect. So when you're in a marriage, and all of a sudden that feeling goes away, and then you, oh my God, you get it from this other girl, you're like, oh my God, that's the one for me. Like, what am I doing in this marriage? And then you start taking down the marriage and all the things that you create, and you start to create a pedestal and you put them on, and then eventually where you're at is not good enough, they're not worthy enough, this is what you need, and it's like, I need to feed the addiction, I need to feed the addiction. And then a lot of times the male will go do that, and they'll finish, and all of a sudden they're like, oh,
what did I do?
Oh, my marriage.
Absolutely.
Oh, and then, and it's not fair to the woman. It's not fair to him. And this is why I mean, like, there needs to be more support groups and more people out there to talk about this kind of stuff. Because a lot of times we talk about our twin flame. There must be only one. You know, it's just like, and then in our heads we're like, oh my God, there's only one person. Maybe I married the wrong person. Me personally speaking, I believe that there's more than one person for anybody, but it doesn't mean you need all those people. There's a lot of people in this world, but just because there are other people doesn't mean that you found one, but you can still connect with the other without a lustful thing. You can still love somebody without having to be in them. And some of my best friends that are women at this age, like, I love these women. They're like my sisters, they're my family, but it took me, I got to the point where it got so bad that I had to stop, and I actually went celibate for 14 months. I said, you know what, I'm with women, I'm spending time with women, I'm going through the motions, but why do I not feel happy? Why is it that, like, I'm triggered and I need to do something and I need this? I'm like, what is going on? So I stopped. And during that time, I actually stopped pleasuring myself as well. I stopped it all. It was the hard. They talk about quitting heroin's hard. Oh my God, was that hard. My body was like so used to producing so much, and it's just like, it kept on producing.
Yeah,
what do we do with it? I'm like, oh, this, you know, people are like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm just feeling a little heavy these days. And eventually the body adapts. The body's an amazing thing. It adapts. And then I was able to sit and have the connections, like what I was looking for. And then I started having relationships, real relationships, where I was fully present. And honestly, I started seeing people as people. And it wasn't that I couldn't when we had the conversation. It's just, and when I'd have conversation, I'd sit with them, but now it was amplified. And now I was able to sit and talk and really see them as an individual and really be able to kick that addiction away. And you know, it's been over 6 years since that, and you know, it's like I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, and this is also one thing that I actually had to quit in my life as well. And to be honest, I've never been I've never seen such benefits from something like that. To be in a room, not where I'm sitting with beautiful women, and I'm like, I need to go, and come back and like,
Yeah.
it's like I need to get my dose. I need to get my hit quick. It's not like, it's like, no, man, I can sit in the room and we can engage, because whether you want to talk about it in spirituality or whatnot, but we do have that balance of masculine and feminine.
Yeah. And it's about honoring that, you know, not just the woman externally in our lives, but the inner feminine,
Honoring,
yeah, within each of us, which is completely, you know, deteriorated by the consumption of all these pornographic movies. And yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to build meaningful, lasting connections with all the people in your lives. And, you know, for me, I just found that this was preventing my ability to do that. I was living the secret life where I had these impulses and I had these urges. And from the programming that I received, I believe that the only way for me to do that was to either pleasure myself or keep on engaging in more of this content. And, you know, I got to a point where I realized that it was insatiable. It was insatiable. It doesn't, you know, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it doesn't matter how much you watch. It doesn't matter how attractive, you know, the women that are in these videos are. It is insatiable. It is meant to be insatiable. It is meant to be a trap.
oh, why, that's $1 billion industry.
Exactly.
Because they know exactly what to do and how to program it. So for sure.
Yeah. And now what I've found is, before I thought I identified as a lustful man. So to me, when I'd get that urge, I'd be like, you know what? I'm a guy. It's normal. Men get these urges. Just as long as you're not hurting anyone, it's fine. And now I've learned to take a step back. So anytime I feel those impulses or all those urges, I take a step back and I say, wait a minute. So I'm feeling this impulse and I'm feeling this urge. And sure, I have the choice of going and satisfying it right away. Or I could sit back and look at this part of myself that wants to engage in this content and ask myself, is that what I really want? Do I really want to go and do this again? I've done it so many times before. I've been doing it all my life. It hasn't brought me peace. It hasn't brought me any kind of joy. If anything, it's made me feel more and more ashamed, and it's gotten me even more and more addicted. Or do I want to make a choice that instead of wasting my sexual energy on just pleasuring myself, I could instead sit down and make the conscious choice to use my sexual energy in a more positive and constructive way, to create the life that I want, to invest in the relationships that are going to bring me this fulfillment that I'm looking for. And it's been beautiful. And this is one of the things that I want to talk about is having dealt with this addiction for such a long time. What is it like to be on the other side? And what I want to tell men, and this isn't for everybody, like, not to presume that every single man has this issue, but for us, we've had this experience and we're sharing it. And for those who identify with this, I want you to know that there is a beautiful alternative to being addicted to lust and to being a slave to this addiction and to being controlled by it. And the alternative is to become conscious. The alternative is to sit down and say, you know what? I have these urges, I have these impulses, but I also have my willpower. I also have my sense of right or wrong. I also have the ability to choose and to say to yourself that I am no longer going to be a slave to this. My sexual energy is very sacred. It is an energy that is meant to allow me to manifest the life that I truly want to live. I am no longer going to waste it on pleasuring myself and feeding an industry and an addiction that wants nothing but the distortion of the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. We have the choice as conscious men to honor the feminine, not only outside but inside of us as well, and to come into harmony and balance where the relationship between the masculine and the feminine is not just purely sexual or physical, it is on a much deeper level. It is a relationship that allows you to come to harmony within and balance parts of your relationship with yourself and with others in a way that creates beautiful connections.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How would you define lust and how would you define love, seeing how you've gone through this?
Yeah, see, initially I thought lust was love. So whenever I would get aroused or I would get excited or I would get those impulses, I would think, oh, it's love. And it was difficult because you know what? I was in love with a very large number of women growing up. Because every time I would feel that impulse, I would mistake it for love. And I'd be like, oh my God, I'm in love with her. Oh, I'm in love with her. Oh no, but wait, I'm in love with her. And then 10 minutes later, oh, but I'm in love with her. And it was very confusing.
So do you believe, is it love at first sight or is it lust at first sight then?
It's lust at first sight. It's this desire to first of all viewing the other person as a sexual object, and based on the programming from watching all the pornographic movies, wanting to replicate that kind of scenario with them. And that's what I see lust as. And you know what, lust could be with sex, but lust could be with any other things, right? It's an addictive energy that's meant to make you chase a high over and over again and never really being satisfied, and it just keeps you stuck in a never-ending cycle. Love, on the other hand, which I used to think was that impulse that I would get, now I've understood that love has very little to do with sexual energy and any kind of physical activity. Love is all about being present and not having to run away, whether mentally or emotionally, somewhere else in order to be able to put up with your present life circumstance. Love is showing up and accepting the other person in front of you exactly as they are. It spans everything, their character, their personality, their baggage, their wounds, their traumas. Whereas with lust, there's this excitement, there's this impulse to be with the woman, but the moment that you engage in sexual activity and it's over, that's it, it's gone. Love is not something that ends. It doesn't have a beginning or an end. It's an ongoing commitment to accepting the person that you're in a relationship with, no matter what they bring to the table. So I had it completely mixed up, and largely due to that programming. But the beautiful thing is that, as you said, like, you went celibate for a while, you stopped pleasuring yourself, and you just disengage with this content and material. And although you go through initial stage of withdrawal and thinking, oh my God, I realized when
the fact that I went through withdrawal,
yes,
is like,
you're like, it opens up your, right?
Like quitting drinking, stopping drinking, easy. Smoking, easy. Porn, I went through withdrawal.
Yeah.
But it's not just me. It was like my whole body was like, it's like give me this thing that
you've been giving me. Exactly. And you know what? I also noticed that. I noticed that when I made a commitment to to no longer engage with that content, every time I would get anxious, or if I went through nervousness or uncomfortable emotions, the first thing I wanted to do was to pleasure myself.
Oh, yeah.
Because it almost became like the escape from whatever it is that I was going through. And I noticed how, like you're saying, my body needed it. It wanted it. It was like, go engage in this content. Let's move this energy. Let's get it out of our system so that we can go back to living our life. And I'm like, but why? Why do I need to do this? And again, like you said, that's when you realize there's something wrong. When it's this insatiable appetite that you can't control.
When it comes to a lot of us, we really do need to understand our own definitions of lust and love. And the reason I say that is when you're watching, listen, movies are created in a way to keep you interested because they're exciting and stuff, but a lot of times in movies, the way that love is portrayed is not the love that honors us. You know, it's like, I've said this before, it's like the movie The Notebook destroyed things growing up because girls are like, I want that love, and like all the guys are like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
But it was crazy, it didn't make sense, and they're like, because that's what it is, because it's exciting, but man, it was hard. It was really hard to connect, and the question was like, I want love like theirs.
Yeah.
Ask for love like yours. And what does that mean? Ask yourself questions to understand, because these things take time to understand. We're constantly growing. We're constantly trying to learn different ways to love ourselves. You know, I know there's years where I didn't even look in the mirror because I didn't want to look at myself because I didn't like the person I was, but yet I was still moving in that direction. And only when I took time to take time to define my words, I started to redefine my world.
Yeah.
And I started to find ways to love myself and honor myself, and started to realize who is toxic, what am I putting in, what am I surrounding myself with. And instead of finding these guys that I needed to fit in with, I started to find family like him where I belong.
Yeah.
I want to have these kind of conversations. I want to talk about the things. I want to speak my truth, and I want to give myself permission to be who I am, because I spent so many years hiding who I was because I thought that I wasn't good enough and I needed to put myself lower and put people up above me. I mean, I needed to be a man, and I needed to do this and that and buy this, and I was like, man, like I learned so much of that by just saying, what do you really want? And I started realizing in situations, why do I feel bad? Well, that's because I'm not honoring myself.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we get this lustful thing and we want to chase. Well, that lust is it's like a sweet tooth. You have that cake, it feels good, but when you eat that whole cake, it is junk food.
Yeah.
It is. But when you actually cultivate it and create these gourmet meals where you sit and it nourishes every single part of you, then you feel great. Now, whether that be monogamy, whether that be poly, whatever it is that you do to honor yourself, because each person has their own way that they want to do it, and I don't believe that one is more correct than the other, but as long as you're taking reference points to check in with yourself, what did that feel? How did that feel? Opening up dialogues of communication with you and your partner, and really understanding that these lustful moments are not going to satisfy you. They're going to satisfy what has been drawn to you, what's been created for you, but it's not going to give you what it is that you're looking for. And that's why we keep on going back and going back and going back. And because we change the genres or stuff, that's not growth. That's just further ways going down into the addiction, where that one hit is now not enough. I need 15 hits and I need to do this. Well, think about it like this. Later in our lives, when our body stops, do we want to continue to put drugs in our body in an unnatural way? Or do we want to be able to say, hey, find that partner, find that person, or even be able to be with ourselves and be like, I loved myself, I honored myself, I respected the people around me, and surround yourself with beautiful men and women who you've connected with in a soulful and a very beautiful way.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting you talked about that fantasy. And you know what I find they sell this so there's a fantasy that they sell to men, and there's a fantasy that they sell to women.
Yes.
So the fantasy that they sell to men is multiple partners, right? Through the pornographic movies and the content. Oh, you know, there's all these like attractive women out there, and you can basically engage with all of them. And then they sell the fantasy of the woman about the one, about this one love, or you know, the knight in shining armor who's gonna come on a horse.
Depending on the genre that she watches.
It's true. It's true, but
in general, yeah.
But just in general, I find men grow up with this fantasy that they can just have multiple partners and engage in activity with all the women that they want to, whereas women are always looking for that one man. And I believe both of them are fantasies.
100%.
Both do not exist. So men, you know, we're not meant to have multiple partners. Like our sexual energy is very sacred. It is meant to be shared. There's nothing wrong in experiencing it. It is beautiful. However, it is sacred, and it is meant to be shared with someone that you have a deep commitment with, someone that you are on the same page with in life. Because you know, when you engage with someone sexually, you guys open up your fields and your energy fields to each other. So if they have, if they have traits that you don't believe in or that you're not on the same page with, some of that stuff is going to come. And you always talk to me about how sometimes even just by eating certain food, you consume
the energy, and you
the
feel
energy
it.
of, it is very sacred. It is not our natural state of being to want multiple partners and to be looking for the next high at every corner. And at the same time, we're not meant to come here and just look for this one person that's gonna be the answer to all of our.
Don't find somebody and project that you need to satisfy me. The one thing that I learned is this, and they've done research, and I thought this was really interesting. It's like, so think about the people that you sleep with, and think about that every time you engage with them, you take a little bit of them with you. Now, internally, if you don't know what's going on and what they're struggling, you take a little bit of that, you're going to be confused in your life too. Where did I get this? And you'll start to realize, I realized that a lot of that was not me, and I had to work through other problems of other people. It's just like, you got to understand that one moment can give you lifetimes of hardship. And understand, one of my favorite things in life that I've heard is, when you do what's easy, life is hard. But when you do what's hard, life is easy. When you hold yourself and you wait and you commit, you have that patience, and then you see, and things will slowly show themselves what they are. But when you just want to rush into it, you don't really see what's transforming to be. And they've done a lot of research about that as well, like that when you have a little more patience, a little more willpower, it's amazing the things that happen in your life. But when we just indulge into that junk food, it's crazy what happens into our body, because even our body can't sustain that. So now that we shared a lot, this has just been a phenomenal topic, and it's definitely something we'll continue to talk about and share a little more. I'd just like to say thank you for everybody for tuning in, and Yazeed, thank you for your time, your energy, and being so open and sharing your story and a little more of us, about yourself with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And you know what? I just want to say one thing that just came to mind, and I've read this before, like when I was getting into spirituality, about how you've got.
We have 1 minute.
Okay. You've basically, the whole story about having a dark wolf and a light wolf, and it's all about which wolf you feed. There are parts inside of us that want us to act on our impulses and go out there, and like you said, without thinking about it. It depends on which wolf you feed. Do you feed the part of you that wants lasting, meaningful relationships, or do you feed the part of you that wants the quick?
And it really breaks down to, we're just sharing our story the way that we've experienced it through our lives. We're not here to blame, to shame. You go through your life, you go through your journey, you go through everything that you need to go through to come to wherever you need to go. All that we were saying is, no matter what it is, we do love, we do support, and we do hold space for people. And if you ever want to connect with us, you want to reach out to us, you want to talk to us, just share your thoughts, share your feeling, and always understand that you're not alone, that you have worth and you have value, and you have permission to be whoever it is that you want to be, and speak your truth. Even if you think it's strange, even if you think it's weird, even if you think people don't understand, you'd be amazed at how that could free somebody. So once again, thank you, Yazeed.
Thank you, brother.
This was beautiful.
It was awesome.
And we'll see you guys soon. Thank you for tuning in.